sekunder. Ja, varmt välkomna till CMB och ni som sitter på kontoret eller hemma. Ni ser att folk börjar sätta sig lite grann här och komma rätt på plats och sådär. Känns ju toppenbra. Fantastiskt att så många har tagit sig hit. Lite oroliga igår när det snöade och man vet ju aldrig i den här stan med färdmedel och sådär. Men kul att så många är här och ni är väldigt många även på länk eller vad man ska säga nu för tiden där ute i cybervärlden. Här på plats ska jag bara säga några korta saker innan vi kör igång. Det viktigaste för er som sitter här är att man kan ta sig ut härifrån om det skulle behövas. Det brukar det ju inte göra, men det finns ju en ingång där ni kom in och det finns en nödutgång bakom här precis. Och den här väggen som är jättefin, den kan man bara springa över om det ska behövas. Den är väldigt lätt att välta. Stäng gärna av era telefoner, kan man ju tänka på innan, vore bra. Och sist men inte minst så kommer Malin som står där borta, vår kommunikatör, hon kommer filma lite korta snuttar och sånt där. Och är det så att man känner att man absolut inte vill vara med på det sen så kan man säga till. Ni ser Malin står där borta vid dörren. Så känner ni er träffade kring den informationen kan ni prata med henne efteråt sen. Idag ska vi prata om cirkulära affärsmodeller. Ett forskningsprojekt som CMB finansierat som är avslutat. Här på bordet finns det några kortrapporter som är precis klara, rykande färska från tryckeriet. Och vill man ha en sån i pappersformat men inte är här så kan man ju höra av sig till oss såklart. Annars finns den på vår hemsida under publikationer så kan man ladda ner den där. Det går jättebra. Och Martin Buser och Rickard Andersson på byggnadsdesign på Chalmers. Docent i byggnadsdesign och doktorand i byggnadsdesign. Och ni ska berätta om ert forskningsprojekt. Varmt välkomna hit.
Tackar.
Tack så mycket.
Yeah, welcome. The first shock is this presentation is going to be in English. So we first apologize for not doing it in Swedish. I am Martin Buser, Ricard. I guess you can identify who is whom in the group. The agenda we have for today is first the context, why are we here today and what are we standing for? Then a few definitions, what is circularity, what are business model, what are circular business model? Then something about the method is, after all, a PhD student which is here, so he had to account for how he has worked with it. And then we are looking at the company and the findings, and finally we will come up with a few recommendations. I have to warn you, we are not going to give you a list of successful circular business model. So the presentation is not about showing off what the company are doing. This is not the purpose of our study. The purpose of our study is trying to understand what the company which are forefront in developing circular model are doing and how they are doing it. And if there is something from what they do and how they do it that we can learn from. Yes. So the context, Sweden is not doing so well with recycling material. The circular gap is identifying that 96% of the material we reuse in general in Sweden is virgin material, so there is something we can do there to actually improve the circularity. Statistics, it's just give you a frame. 10 to 15% of waste material during construction project. There is something which can be improved there. The picture here is illustrating that a lot of offices are not used during the working day. Is it something we can change in the way we work together? And this is an EU statistic. 50% of people living in their own house thinks that they have too much space or not the space that they really need. In terms of being reasonable with what they need to warm up and live in. And then something a bit more political. You're probably aware that the goal of sustainability or circularity that the former government had have been a bit changed. And the TO, Aftal, is coming now with this idea that people have to choose freely to go into circularity, and it has to be linked to economy. And this is also mirroring what the EU have said. If we want to be circular, we have to create a market for that, and the market has to be self-sufficient. Circularity, probably you know better what the circularity concept is than I do. But here we have just a summary of what circular economy involved in the construction sector. Of course, enabling the reselling and reuse of existing material is a very important part. But promoting circular design is also something we should get starting to do. Improving the durability of the building and the adaptability. The integration of LCA in project is now by law an obligation for the sector, right? We have to have an LCA assessment of what we are doing. Another way to work with it is also to think about how to share and lease the existing asset in a different way. Something we have heard many times in the industry is that we are not producing car, and therefore we cannot have the same model of production than Volvo has, and we cannot do second-hand because precisely we are not working with car. This is a brand model, and I think what is interesting there is to think about the different part of the building and their life lengths in terms of how long do they support being not touched, and how often do they have to be modified. And of course, the structure is something which can last between 30 to 300 years. And the site is not something we can change so easily. But this being a part, the skin and the facade and the exterior is something which is regularly modified. If we think about new insulation system, for instance, here the span is between 20 to 35 years. Services, pipe, wire, energy, this is also system we need to be renewed. So there is a possibility there to think circular. The space plan, how we modularize the space we are living in. Here, the statistic is between 10 to 30 years, but one of the property owner we have talked to have told us that every 6 years, in an average, they reshape their offices. So here again, there is spaces to improve. And stuff, which is all the furniture and other things which are lighting and all that, which are mobile, also things which can deserve to be circular. And now we are moving to the business model with Ricard.
Yes. So we just want to introduce our view on business models and how we define it. First of all, I would just like to claim that there is this assumption for business models that enterprises and organizations are able to control their business practices, and in doing so they're also able to create and capture value which they're offering to their customers. And if we start off with the first definition, which is by Thies in 2010, where they describe that business models describe the manner an enterprise delivers value to customers, entices customers to pay for value, and convert those payments into profit. So it's about generating some form of value which they are offering to their customers, which in turn are paying for this value, and hopefully that you make some money out of it in the end. But there are also other ways to describe it. One of them could be that it's more of a tool which is used to analyze and develop new business proposition. It could also be kind of like the end result of the efforts that you do in developing services and or products. And lastly, we could also see it as a process for how to develop and implement these new propositions which you are offering to your customers. Another way to look at it is the way that Ludic and Freud is discussing it. They see business models as consisting of some main dimensions. Here they have 4 major dimensions, which is the value proposition, the value delivery, the value creation, and the value capture. And then you have a set of subcategories which is correlating to this. And if we start off with the value proposition, that is very much, okay, so what is the benefit that the company or the organization is proposing to their customers? And here it could either be in the terms of a product or a service, or also a combination of the two. Second part is the value delivery. And this is like, how do we deliver this value which we are proposing to our customers? And here first we try to identify, okay, so who is the target customers? Who is the people that we want to provide this service or product to? And then we try to define the value delivery process. So how do we actually deliver this value to the customer? The third one is the value creation, and this is about creating the value, of course. And here we identify the different partners and stakeholders that are necessary in order to create the value. And then we try to define what the value creation process looks like, what are the different steps that we need to take in order to be able to create this value. And last is the value capture, which is a lot more related to the financial aspect of it, where we try to identify what the revenues are that are generating from selling this value, and then also the associated cost, and hopefully in the end we are able to make some money out of it. And if we incorporate the circularity aspect of it, here are 10 examples which I just would like to mention. This is kind of the different types of circular business model that we were looking at when we were trying to make contact with companies that we identify as being at the forefront. So it's divided into 5 steps of, you could say, the phases of a building. We have the plan and design, the procurement, the construction, the operations, and the end of life. And for the planning and design, they talk about green building design, which is about reducing a building's environmental footprint. And this could either be achieved through engineering, consulting, and advisory services. The second one is the advanced design software, where we try to use software and different forms of databases in order to make it as efficient as possible. And if we move over to the procurement, we have 2 parts, which is the renewable construction materials and recycled construction materials, which is basically that you either procure material which is made from renewable sources, or that you procure material which is made out of recycled resources, or material that could be recycled in the future. For the construction, we have the resource-efficient construction, which is about minimizing the amount of material that we need to put into a building. And then we have the excess material recycling, which is from the construction phase. We usually get a certain amount of waste, commonly like 10%, and that we are trying to do something with that afterwards. For the operations, we have the energy efficient services, which is trying to make the building as energy efficient as possible. And for the space sharing services, it's about increasing the flexibility and utilization of the space. And for the last 2, which is related to the end of life, the first one is the building life extension, where we're trying to make use of the building for as long time as possible, where we also incorporate some kind of maintenance in order to keep the building in such a good shape that we are able to use it for as long as possible. And the last one is that if we at one point feels that we need to demolish the building, then we should make sure that we're able to reuse or upcycle the material that is kept within it. And then we have the method, and this I will only briefly discuss. On the left side, you see the number of people that we've been talking to for the 3 projects that we've been working with. And in total, this accounts to 57 interviews with about 64 respondents. But for the CMB project, we primarily focus on 24 of these interviews, which include people both from Sweden and Denmark. And for the Danish people, we also had 4 workshops where we try to work with helping them in the process of developing circular business models. And just to mention the different companies that have been part of the study, it's 2 large architect companies. We have 3 contractors, 3 property owners, 3 material suppliers, and 1 international engineering consulting firm. And what we would just like to add here is that we kind of see this as a snapshot or a window in time where we've been talking to these people and we get their view of how it is right now or how it has been, but it's based on their perception. So we're not really trying to generalize from this, but this is what we've seen throughout the study. And this also relates to the first part of the finding here, which we describe as circularity as a moving target. And when we were out trying to find these companies, we did searches on the internet, in news media and in industry publication to try to identify, okay, so who are these companies, which is really at the forefront. And when you get kind of a positive view of the sector, because it feels like there's a lot happening out there. If you visit a lot of the websites, you find example of how different companies are working with circularity, and which is very positive. But perhaps we also see this kind of as a narrative of how organizations are presenting themselves, where circularity seems to be a quite central part. But when we talk even more to them, and this was also some feedback that we received from some of the master students, is a kind of disappointment, because it felt like when they are out there talking to the companies, perhaps it's not so big part of their everyday business. But here we also talked to a lot of different actors, and of course there's different points of view. And if you're talking to some people that are very close to this, then it feels like it's a lot more. I would also like to say in different parts of the organization, the practices are quite diversified. So we wouldn't really like to generalize from what the different companies are doing based on this.
Yep. And
You want to?
yeah. But circularity is also a moving target for the organization. What we have seen is that, of course, the structure of the industry is changing slowly, but it's changing a bit. But the industry is also bombarded by new legislation, new regulation, new standard for certification. The standard themselves and the certification process are renewing themselves, so this continual change that the company have to adapt with. So for some of the sustainable manager, for instance, we have seen, the first question was, what is it we're talking about, and how do we work with it, and what are the differences from the other waves we have had last year or 6 months ago. Another thing which is supporting this idea of moving target is that many actors are involved in the decision process. So of course, if we compare to Volvo, which can decide how they want to organize their production, it's a bit more complicated for the industry. And it's not only the private actor which are working there, the public actor have also their saying in what kind of building can be done. We have cases where finally the contractor and the client had found a way to be circular and reusing brick, but then the color was not fitting with the program of the municipality, so they could not build it. So this requires that there is a flexibility from all the partners in trying to work with circularity, because there is not one solution fits all. There is also different expectation in all this organization, different norms, different standards. This is also something we have seen when the municipality are working with a contractor. They may have different understanding of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and this needs to be aligned. And of course, this creates interdependency between all these actors, and this is a break or hinder to develop circularity. Another thing we see, maybe not directly linked to circularity, but which is also part of the discussion here, is the slow production of green products and services. If we look at the number of lorries, electric lorries, for instance, produced by Scania or Volvo, the production of those electric vehicles is very little compared to their normal production, and we have cases of contractor who had to wait 9 months to get one electric vehicle out of the 10 they had ordered. And of course, this is not helping the transition. Another thing is also that the circularity principle may actually go against what we have defined as sustainable principle or CO2 reduction principle. So there is sometimes tension, sometimes overlap, but sometimes also conflicting decision to be made and trade-off between those different concepts. So moving target, because it's difficult to get there. So now going to how this circular business, CBM is not CMB, circular business model. It depends on the organization structure, and maybe this is also a point we want to make, is that when we discuss circularity and sustainability as well, we very much focus on the sustainable manager and the leadership that they may drive the organization with. We also see that circularity is a structure issue, is how the organization is supporting or not the decision of the sustainable manager. So what we see as well is a kind of frustration for many of them, because if they have the power to define a solution, they don't have the power to impose the solution to the rest of the organization. And here it is a kind of small kingdom things that each project has its own king or queen. They are queen now as well. But that it's a problem for the organization to have the lever to be able to force the project to actually integrate those solutions. And this is a frustration that many of the sustainable managers we have talked to have identified. Sorry, but we still have identified 3 ideal types of a different strategy. They are not necessarily exclusive, so you can have those type mixed in organization. And the first one is the champion, is what we were mentioning before, is the person which is embedding and representing the change in the organization. One or several, it doesn't need to be one singular person, but a small group which are driving the organization. They are usually very popular and charismatic people, so of course the leadership characteristics are important. So they are the one who set the circularity agenda and they work toward that. They are often identified inside the organization, but also outside of the organization. So usually it's the faces you meet in professional media. Of course, the weakness of the champion strategy is then when the champion have enough of your organization, then he or she can move to another one. And the dependency of the organization toward the champion is, of course, a problem to be solved in organization. And we see that among the sustainable manager, there is a lot of mobility. So people are changing job at a higher frequency. So that's the first, the champion one. Another thing, maybe probably more at the architect, but also some of the property owner, is what we call empower group. We haven't found really the right concept to describe it, but is where it's not just a small group of people, but a broader group of people which is equipped with circularity knowledge and competencies. And their work is to be sure that each project is not including circularity, but at least have a kind of audit. And this is a bit different from the champion because it can be different department, it can be people working not together, but they have the competencies to work with it. What we see with the Empower Group is that the part of their work is institutionalized, and what it means is that there is method in the organization, which means that they have to be contacted, they have to be consulted for each of the project. What the outcome of the project are is something else, but this is something they are forced to do. Another thing as well is that they are not expected to drive or to create revenue on a short-term basis. It's really seen as a long-term investment, that the more within the company people are equipped with that, the better chance that circularity is becoming an asset. And the third group is the top-down approach. Is the company which have decided at the top management to have a strategy and which are hoping that the strategy is going to cascade down the hierarchical level. What is interesting with this strategy is that it's aligning the goal of the company with the circular goal. So this is quite good. But the problem, of course, if we think about the small kingdom we discussed before, is that those initiatives may not always reach the project. And another things we have seen as well, and this goes for an engineering but also supplier, is that this idea of having a general strategy for the company prevent the local development of ad hoc solution. People are tight with what the company wants to do, and when they are part of project where they could actually do something, then they don't have the responsibility and the power to actually do it, because it's not fitting with the overall hierarchy. So this is also a danger for the company to have this kind of strategy, because what you do there is, again, having one solution fits all, and this solution needs usually to be contextualized. So this is what we saw in those companies and how they work with it. As I said, it's not exclusive. So what they do as well, which is supporting circular business model, is of course training, so that people are equipped with the competencies, new work processes, being sure that the project have to work with circularity in one point or another, usually when they develop the program. Networking is also one way to actually be sure that your ideas or other people of ID can be shared. The project, we have to say that we have seen a lot by now of circular building, or building which are implementing circular aspect. So it's not that this building don't exist, just for you to be sure that it's not that we claim there is no building which are circular, but they are not business model in the sense that they are not solution on the shelf that the company can just implement it as such, because all the method and the way to do it's straightforward. The platform, and this is a picture we have, most of the big companies have that platform now where they collect material. There is private platform, there is public platform, so the story about not being able to access material, at least part of it, is becoming old-fashioned. Something very important as well, and CC Build and Total Beam are very important there, is the role of IT tool, how much we can alleviate the work building on those tool. EPDI, the fact that there is more and more information about the project and that we know what they represent. And of course the LCA. What is missing in the list is also the certification and the standard, because certification is helping also to engage those processes. So now to the business model. What all those companies are doing is consulting. So they all, the in-house competence they have developed in sustainability and circularity is something they also propose to their customer. And this is something we have seen in all the company. But apart from that, there is not so much that we could see. But in the work processes, systematic audit for projects is, for instance, one solution. Product, and this is just example, one company, for instance, have decided to have less product to choose in between. And engage in and buy more expensive product, which quality is higher. And the intent there is to have product that can be reused. When you have less product, it's easier to change. If it's broken, it's easier to repair. So that's one way to actually maybe limit the customer, but also go for that. Another way to do that is to recycle the material, bricks, partition wall, window, woods, etc., etc. So there is, of course, there tentative. It's bubbling, but it's not straightforward there. And something which is very important for the value proposition so far is that all the cases we have seen are specially tailored for the project. So there's no solution fits all. Again, it's really something which is defined to fit the project itself. The value delivery. This is maybe for us the biggest surprise, is that circularity is not the same appeal as sustainability had. Sustainability has a connotation which is positive for most of us. We want to be sustainable. It seems that circularity is not going as well down the drain. For the architect, it was very important for them that the building was not patchwork. This is a picture of Ostad, which is a patchwork. It's the old Carlsberg building. So they have cut the bricks and put them together. But for our architect, this idea that buildings should be shabby chic was not something they were going for. Their customer are big company and they want building which look good. So circularity is good, but circularity is not a selling argument. For the property owner, that was also an issue, because who says second hand says discount? And for the time being, it's not cheaper to circulate. So the strategy of some of the property owner we have seen is to hide the fact that it's circular. They don't need to know that the pipe which have been put in your office are old pipe, so that they avoid to have to negotiate the prices. And of course, this is a bit of a surprise for us, because we were expecting that people would serve on circularity if we have served on sustainability as an argument for selling. But this is not the case. So the valid delivery of circularity is not as successful as it was for the sustainable one. Value creation, how do we do that? How do we work with partner? In all of the project, the showcase project, there is a lot of networking going on, and the partnership is very important. But what we have seen as well in those network of interest and research projects is maybe a focus more on material and product than really on the business processes. So it's not about who is going to make money out of it, it's more how can we succeed in doing the project. And of course, if those projects have to become business as usual, then they need to take into account the economy as well, and who is taking risk and who is controlling the risk. So there is question there, which are maybe not always discussed in the network. Network of interest is also difficult sometimes, because people from different organizations don't always have the right or the power to integrate the company into the process. I mean, what is their freedom there? Are they representing the organization? If so, they need to have the support of the organization to invest. What we have seen as well is that, though this is something that the literature is very much supporting, is agreement with suppliers so that the supply chain should be reorganized. None of the company we have visited had such agreement. They are all very keen on having that, but nothing has been signed so far. One of the property owner have created circularity premium for the contractor, and there the idea is to compensate for the payback when some of the contractors are buying material, they get some refunding afterwards, which is making money for the project. Of course, if we want to change the way we produce building, we also have to compensate for that. So this company, for instance, is giving money for circularity to the contractor. Value capture. Here we should really know clear revenue of circular business so far. So none of the people we have talked to could really say, well, yeah, we make money out of this. But this doesn't mean that there is no value, and this is why it should not be written benefit, but revenue, because there is a lot of attention to those companies. They are mediatized, they got customer because they are mediatized. They have attained what we call here moral legitimacy, so they are seen as the front-runner actors in the industry, which is also helping them to have a green loan and investment with lower rate, because they are seen as sustainable. Is giving them a leading position in the market, and as I said, it's advantageous in terms of investment and loan. Challenges. This is a bit of a summary of what we've seen so far. A lot of changes all the time. How should we just wait for the next one and jump over the circularity, because probably in 1 or 2 years there will be a new concept focusing on other aspects. This is what some of the project managers are doing, just bending the head and waiting for the next wave. So how to motivate them to be part of the project, and this is really something general in the industry and in all innovation strategy is easy to convince the one who know or we are sure that this is important, but this is not the target. The target should be the one who think that this is not important, right? Because they are the one who need to be moved. Another thing is that it's super exciting to make a new initiative and to go for something new. Is a bit more boring to maintain this initiative, to assess them and to try to institutionalize them. So there is also part of this work which is maybe the nicest part is to create and develop and come up with the idea. Maybe the boring part of it, and this is we can see with the contractor and the project manager as well, it's much more fun to start a project than to close it. Maybe there is something there as well in terms of how we work with sustainability and circularity, that we need to be consequent and be sure that the project we are making are actually follow up, that initiative actually assess and try to be implemented and institutionalized. The learning taking place, this is what we were mentioning before, is this idea that the sustainable manager is a volatile person who can choose other places, and if the organization want to be sure to maintain this knowledge, they should be sure that the organization can theorize it. Research project can often focus on the technical and material aspect. This will already be seen. We are close to the end. Recommendation 1. It's not enough to have a champion, we claim. Yes, it's enough to make initiative, but it's not enough to institutionalize the circular project. What we think is important is to be sure that different departments are part of it. And here we target especially the finance department and the sustainable one, but the marketing department is very important as well. And what we see is the coalition of those departments is very important for things to happen. This is the other one. The second one is about the long-term mobilization. This is what I just said, right? That we need assessment procedure. It cannot be just one shot. It needs to be improved in the long term. Something I'm a bit sad about, but which is still a part of the industry very much, is the use of key performance indicators. If you cannot prove that your project is actually making money, probably you won't be able to go further with it. We also think that maybe we should have innovative valuation technique so that we think differently when we try to value those projects. But for the time being, the key performance indicator are trying to bridge with circularity goals, but for the time being, they are still building on very concrete measurement. And of course, there's a struggle for most of the project to actually live up to this expectation. But this is the point we were making, that risk and cost should be addressed and part of the discussion. Yeah, the new innovation valuation technique. We have not spent so much time discussing IT, but it's sure that there is something to get out of it. The more information we have about the building and its content, the easier it becomes to work with it. The client need to know about what is going on. And as we have said, many of those companies are actually advising clients and trying to convince them this is the thing to do, but it's not there. Something as well, I don't know what you would think about that, but usually the coalition of actors is no, not the coalition actor, but the project has a group of people working for the project. And of course, circularity, if we think about sharing risk, if we think about sharing cost, maybe another form of collaboration, which is supporting a long-term collaboration rather than just a project one, is one way to go. So to have agreement between the actors that we are going to do several things together and try to implement circularity, and maybe in the first project I win, and the second project you win, but this is creating on the long term maybe a better way to actually develop this solution than having the project as a unit. And the ninth, this is the last one, and this is a quotation, maybe we don't need to go the full blow every time. Maybe it's enough to have 60, 70, 20, 30% circularity. Maybe we should be happy when we take small steps, and that those small steps will bring to a bigger change in the industry. And this is maybe a comment to some of the sustainable managers who may be frustrated that their process is not implemented as much as they would like to. But maybe they should be satisfied with having smaller goals and be happy that this change can take small steps instead of big one. Thank you for your attention. All good.
Tack så mycket för det. Här i rummet nu så finns det ju både några champions vet jag och några som är med i empowered groups och några som gärna kanske som sitter högt upp i organisationer och har strategier. Så att nu vill vi ha lite frågor på detta tänker jag. Absolut. Jag misstänker att det finns en och annan reflektion och fråga i rummet. Malin står redan med en mikrofon. Vem har en spännande fråga eller kommentar till detta?
You are so clear that we don't need anything
det är ju
more.
Fantastiskt.
Yeah.
Jag kom på en titel till ett nytt forskningsprojekt.
Yeah.
Revaluating valuation.
Yeah.
Men det har ni redan tänkt ut såklart. Men jag tycker det är så snyggt där.
Mm-hmm.
Apropå att tänka om hur systemet ska fungera. Men jag håller med mycket om man tittar på grupperna som vi har på CMB så känner jag igen mycket av diskussionerna. Både klimatledarskapsgruppen pratar om det här. BIM och digitaliseringsgruppen har ju varit inne och tittat på olika verktyg för att dela cirkulära material och sådär, om hur detta byggs upp. Så det är mycket på gång ändå. Men om ni ska peka mot något, liksom, nu var ni inne på det i början att kanske inte det finns ett bästa exempel, men finns det några projekt man kan titta på, tycker ni, som ni har mött i arbetet här som man redan idag kan kontakta?
But there was a niche project, for instance, in Denmark, which we thought was a bit nice, is that the wood used for the structure, when you do the concrete, so you use wood to... Exactly. So this wood is reused to make bicycle sheds. And this is a product they can sell because, as you know, a lot of Dana cycling. And the bicycle shed is an easy target because it doesn't require the same kind of security or quality of the wood. So that's an easy one to do. So there is this kind of niche things where one material can be reused in the long term and have a kind of system. So the reuse of material during the production, this we have seen the Ely in Skanska is also that the furniture have been made with the wood used during the production of the building, for instance. Then you have the building which are using PET bottle to make walls and all that, and this is more kind of experimentation and showing that there is a potential in it. I'm not sure that Epic has made so much money out of it. Yeah.
Vi har Camilla först här tror jag, som räckte upp handen.
Hejsan.
Den är på.
Hej, Camilla Konradberg heter jag, arbetar som forskare på TME. Jag har en fråga, lite av det som du tog upp här. Om vi blickar ut internationellt, För ni kan, även om er studie inte har alls fokuserat på det. Vilka länder eller var någonstans ser ni där det kanske finns en drivkraft som man skulle kunna titta på? Där de har kommit lite längre än vad ni har sett i Sverige?
Yeah, I think Denmark, there is 4 company out of the company we discussed now, which are Danish company. And of course, the resources in Denmark are a bit more scarce than they are in Sweden, so they are in another condition. But I also think that if you look at not only the experience they've made and the building, is also a trend in the culture. I mean, the TV program in Denmark are about recycling and upcycling. The TV program in Sweden are about demolishing houses and rebuilding them. So it's also a culture choice behind, which is supporting or not the way we think about what recycling and how to upcycle could be made. So I think it's also broader than just looking at the construction, but also think about how do we define something of quality? What is the value of the society now? But yeah, Denmark, I think, is a bit more advanced. Germany and Austria were very good for passive houses and building, which were very energy efficient. They also have a trial with patchwork houses. Now we are facing another thing, if we think about that, is the overheating of buildings. So we have been very obsessed to be sure that the energy was staying in the building. Now the new threat is that we are going to be too warm during the summer. So how do we have buildings which are actually compensating for both superheat and super cold? I mean, this feeling I think we share as well as a researcher, that we have behind all the time, that things are changing all the time, and to adapt to it, and everybody is trying his best, but then there is a lot to put together. I'm not sure I was very clear about which country, but yeah.
Thank you.
Tack. Då ska vi flytta micken bortåt lite här. Ja, börja med Kim först.
Tack. Kim, Hyresgästföreningen. Kim Weinhammar. Jag kanske inte har en fråga direkt, men jag står inför ett problem. Jag jobbar med hyresgäster inför renoveringsprojekt, ofta väldigt stora sådana, och i dialog då med fastighetsägarna. Och då har jag ett exempel på ett större bolag där vi har pratat just om cirkularitet och den här möjligheten att behålla vitvaror. Att man plockar ut toaletter och handfat och sådana grejer. Rengör dem, renoverar och så sätter tillbaks dem. Kanske inte i samma lägenheter, men att de ändå kommer in i någon sorts cirkularitet. Men det menar då det här bolaget att de har provat och att det är omöjligt just ur ett kostnadsperspektiv. Att det är mycket billigare att köpa in nytt än att göra hela den här processen. Och då pratar vi om ett ganska stort bolag. Så just det här perspektivet med värdet liksom kontra det ekonomiska värdet. Det är någonting som jag brottas med just nu och skulle vilja fylla på med argument.
Yeah, I wish I had the solution. We have seen a project where they were supposed to reuse toilet and lavatory, and then it's the people on site we refused to put back old toilet because they didn't want that their work was to put old stuff. And this has been washed and sanitized, so it's not that they were using old things, but the contractor didn't want to do that because they thought it was meaningless to change for old. So there is a lot there, also in terms of culture and what we think is value. There is a lot of toilet, and they say, which are waiting in those platforms to be reused. And of course, if you buy your little hut in the wood, you probably will happily use one. But of course, for the big company, there is another game at stake. So this I don't know. If we look at the Million program, what you're going to do with all those, I don't know. I wish I could help to find answer to that, but I think we are all facing huge quantity of material there, which are not of quality. I mean, of course, to recycle a house built in the 19th century, probably built with nice material that can have a second-hand value, asbest or PVC or other things. It's difficult to find them a future. So it's also what we have built, which is is now the barrier to actually develop circularity, because we have used material which are actually not preventing us to be able to reuse them, because we found out a bit late or too late that they were not so good, right? But yeah, no, sorry, I wish I could.
Yinging tror jag är näst på tur.
I have a question to Rika. I think you made the interview. I don't know, but it's about how when you made the interview, do you have a sense in which, for example, architect or consultant or contractor, do they have some favorite way of doing the business model? Like you have 3 category, and I don't remember.
First of all, we did a lot of the interviews together, and Martine also did some by herself, and I did some by myself. What I think is most prevailing is the companies which are offering different kinds of services, advisory services, which is providing information. We got a question here about where do we go, where do we contact people, and one of the architects was saying that that it's difficult because it's not so much out there. There's not so much other places to look at to get inspiration from, and that's perhaps also one of my suggestions is to contact these companies which are actually proposing or giving advisory services, because they are probably the ones that are at the forefront and has the most information as of now. But that is probably the most prevailing, and then you also have some products which is quite easy to find if you just Google for circular product. You get some example of this. I mean, we have the bricks as one example, and Tarket as a company which is recirculating flooring. So,
I mean, the architects are more in the Empower group, but it's also because it's part of the product they sell. So, of course, they need, if they want to do it, they need to integrate circularity from the beginning. The contractor are maybe the one which are more, either they have champion or they have top-down. Supplier are rather top-down as well, if you think about Target or Knauf, which was part of the study. So, of course, we should be a bit more, and the customer are also segmented. They are very clear for the architect, for instance, that they don't propose the same building to all their clients. They don't propose the same solution to all the clients. So if your client is more on the innovative side, then they allow themselves to be more pushy for solution. But they also have clients which are there for a long time, which are more conservative, and it's very incremental what they're trying to do. So I think there is different strategy on how to work with it as well, depending of the size, what kind of profession you are in, what kind of client you have. But that would require that we have a much broader sample to try to identify how the different organizations are working with it.
Nina har en fråga här fram också.
Jag hade egentligen bara ett liten replik till Kim, Nina Framtiden. Och något av våra dotterbolag, ett av de allmännyttiga bolagen, hade ju kunnat vara ett av de stora bolagen som du pratade om. Eller så är vi förhoppningsvis inte det. Jag tänker bara lite grann hur vi resonerar. Vi har ju supertuffa klimatmål på oss. Vi ska minska klimatpåverkan från alla våra byggprojekt med 90% till 2030, vilket innebär att vi måste gå till större del bevarande, återbruk etc. Och så har man ju liksom lyft upp bruksvärdeshyran som ett hinder, och vi har nog landat i att vi inte tror det. För att tittar man på vad säger vi i bruksvärdeshyran, då pratar vi om kvalitet, vi pratar om funktionalitet etc. Och då tänker vi att däremot så ser vi att det blir inte billigare att återbruka om vi ska göra det med rekonditionering, kanske uppgradering, så att det svarar mot dagens behov. Däremot kan vi se att vi kan få väldigt hög kvalitet, för inte sällan är det väldigt hög kvalitet i de produkterna som går att återbruka och bevara. Så att det är ju då för det första en samsyn i att det inte blir billigare kanske, precis som ni varit inne på. Det blir inte billigare, men vi kan hitta en affär. Så därför har vi valt att säga att vi vill inte prata om nytt eller gammalt, utan vi fortsätter att prata om kvalitet och funktion och sätter bruksvärde utifrån det. Och det kan ju vara så att en rekonditionerad, uppgraderad toalettstol har samma värde som en ny till exempel. Nu vet jag att vi inte sätter bruksvärdeshyra på grund av en toalettstol, men tankemodellen i alla fall. Så det viktigaste för oss här är ju nu att börja jobba med leverantörs- och tillverkarledet, att få till effektiva processer så att det inte blir dyrare när vi återbrukar. Som till exempel vad det gäller toalettstolar nu, så har vi ett samarbete med Gustavsberg som ska kunna uppgradera till snålspolande och ha en cirkulär process som är effektiv och kostnadseffektiv. Så jag tror att vi kommer hitta varandra i de här frågorna.
Mycket bra. Vi ska skicka micken ner dit också, bak i rummet. Under tiden micken flyttar sig så kan jag också, om inte ni redan vet och vill fortsätta prata med om klimat eller om återbruk och handslag för återbruk, så kan man ju prata med Nina säkert efteråt som har stenkoll på de frågorna för Göteborgs stads räkning. Varsågod.
Hej, Maria Glätt på Arkitekter. Jag tänkte bara, vi är inne på den här frågan om ekonomi. Och den är ju den blir ju alltid styrande i alla projekt. Vi vet ju det, att vi kommer dit i slutändan. Och det är kanske lite grann en kuggfråga egentligen, för jag vet inte om det finns något svar. Men det borde ju egentligen vara billigare att göra hållbara lösningar än att göra lösningar som icke är cirkulära och icke är hållbara. Vad tror ni krävs för att vi ska göra den omställningen? För den behövs ju.
I think what we have heard from the interview and what we thought as well, that if you price more transport, if you price more new material, then you give a chance to the recycling one. But we also know that this is not what the government is going for. So then we are a bit short of solution now, because of course what we hear a lot is that the stronger the regulation and the legislation, the more opportunity for the recycling and the circular element to be used, right? But we are not going in this direction at all. So we can forget that the state is going to help us to do it. And this is also why circular business model become interesting. I don't have an economic background, and now I regret it because I think that this is really becoming the nerves of the war. It's not about people being convinced, it's not about a good idea, it's not about trying things, it's about the financing. And so far, of course, there is a new taxonomy, there is the loan are going to be green loan, but we also know that some of the company are doing green in the accounting department, so it's just a question of moving around the figures, and then you are fitting with the new demands, so you don't need even to talk to the sustainable department to find out what they are doing, because it's a question of how you account for things. So there is a lot of things there which I think we should be able to dig, find economists to work with, or people who have a good grasp on that. I miss this competence, and I'm very frustrated now because I also have this feeling that probably this is where the solution is.
Får jag komplettera med en kommentar på det? För det är oftast det som blir problemet, att man har en projektekonomi och det är den som styr, så de faktiskt value creation som blir någonstans, de värdena som man skapar, de går inte rakt in i projektekonomin, och då Absolut. Är det inte genomförbart. Så få den bryggan mellan olika värden och in i projektekonomin. Ja. Finns det någon som har gjort det? Det skulle vara väldigt intressant. Jag vet, Trafikverket har ju en modell för att räkna på social nytta när man bygger vägar och kortar restiden. Men när vi pratar byggprojekt, och det var jätteintressant. Ja. Om det är någon som har gjort det, så får ni sträcka upp en hand.
Well, if anyone has a solution, we are welcoming it.
Någon mer fråga eller fundering här i rummet? Inte just nu kanske. För att följa upp det här då, som du sa nu, utifrån det ni har tittat på i den här studien och diskussionen vi har här, vad är nästa viktiga fokus för forskningen att gå in på? Är det just redovisning och de ekonomiska modellerna, eller?
To me, I mean, there is the economic side, and I think it's also because all the financing model we have proposed to, the taxonomy, for instance, and all that, it's economically based. So if you don't have the understanding of how it works, I mean, you're outside. And I think for many of the small and medium companies, it's an issue to have just the competence to know how to work with it. So the economical side, I think, is very important. For me, this about the sustainable manager, how they work, what are the power or what are not the power, I think is interesting as well. I would like to follow them and see how they work. There is formal and informal network in company. One of the assumptions is depending of your informal network, you are more successful than other. So for me, that would be an interesting way is to go more into the organization. And as we said before, it's not just a question of individual. I mean, the individual we have met, they are competent, driven, super active people. They want change to happen. So it's not about them. It's about how the rest of the organization is able to support or not. And this requires economic understanding, but also maybe some understanding of how those organizations function.
Toppen. Om ni vill fortsätta utveckla era idéer kring det här och letar efter forskningssamarbeten så är ju du kvar lite här och Camilla är här i rummet också som ju jobbar med de här frågorna. Och Martin är ju också programansvarig för DCP.
Yes.
Så är det så att ni vill grotta ner i detta med hjälp av en ex-jobbare så det finns ju en möjlighet att ta upp den kontakten också.
If you want to come and talk to our students how to develop solution, you're very welcome. I mean, it's really something competence we need.
Så ta den chansen, tycker jag är viktigt. Och Vilka, tack så mycket. Och innan vi skiljs åt för idag så ska jag bara säga något kort om vad vi har på gång. Här på CMB, om man tar upp sin telefon, det kan man göra nu, då kan man ju scanna den koden och då så kommer det in i det som är på gång hos oss. Det är lite tunt just nu för jag håller på att byta ut den sidan, eventsidan, det kommer vara en annan form på den inom kort. Så det blir lite lättare att anmäla sig och så framöver. Men det som är på gång, det är att vi har en akademisk timme varannan onsdag. Nästa gång är det nästa vecka den 6:e. Då kommer Julia Engberg från Liljevalchs som ju vann årets guldhus, ungt ledarskap. Som vi firade här för några veckor sedan, eller ja, det börjar ju bli några månader sedan till och med. Men hon kommer att prata utifrån sin ledarskapsfilosofi, hon ger sitt vinnartal helt enkelt. För er som inte var här i oktober så får ni chans till det nu igen. Samma dag faktiskt så är vi också uppe i Stockholm och har ett event där vi ska utgå från ett annat forskningsprojekt som Carl Palmås på Chalmers håller på med. Som handlar om framsyn i arkitekturbranschen specifikt, men det är en bredare approach på det här seminariet uppe i Stockholm. På Söder, också det är snart fullbokat, så har ni kollegor uppe i Stockholm som är i era bolag och som ni tycker ska åka och lyssna på detta, så passa på att gå in och anmäl dem eller att de anmäler sig ganska snabbt där. Det blir en kul eftermiddag där uppe i Stockholm. Sen har vi en lunch i början på nästa år som tittar på det digitala samhällsbyggandet. Det är också ett projekt som har en liten twist. Det kommer bli en workshop efteråt. Det är våra partners Plan B som kommer att göra en framtidsspaning först och efter det sen så har de ett knytkalas. In och titta mer på vad det betyder på vår hemsida. Och så har vi en frukost som precis som idag rapporterar ett av våra forskningsprojekt som handlar om kommunikationens värde i samhällsbyggnadssektorn. Det är den första frukosten den 8 februari. Då hoppas vi att det blir lika många som vi är här nu. Blir vi säkert, om inte vi snöar in. Men ha en fortsatt fin vecka allihopa och trevlig helg. Och även ni som har tittat på YouTube i efterhand eller nu live på sändningen där. Tack så mycket för idag.